Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear here, and we are going to be dealing with Chapter 8 and 9 of Doug's newest book. It's coming out. When is it coming out, Doug?
It'll be in about a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks. It's going to be hot off the presses. Don't let your geology mess up your theology. And without any further ado, these are we're going to deal with a couple of areas which you have visited, but I have not visited too. Yeah. So why don't you start us out, Doug?
Okay, this is going to be called the Nevada Upheaval. Okay. That's what we're going to call this because it's talking about two different parks near Las Vegas, Nevada. And if you go about 25 miles west of Las Vegas, you take Charleston Road out there, and it turns into a rural highway. And it goes into a place called the Red Rock Canyon Conservation Area. And, this is a very beautiful place.
You've been there how many You've been there more than once,
maybe about 3 times
I think you've been there several times.
Yeah, this last time I went with Dan and Teresa Jansen.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one.
And so we went out there. Well, we took her mother to the Grand Canyon West,
okay,
which was something that they wanted to do. So I was able to show them that. But one of the stops was at the Red Rock Canyon, and it's a area where the geology is all messed up. And
yes.
It seems like a lot of Nevada's geology is all messed up, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, we've talked about the fact that, when you go to study geology and they have this whole framework that they have for deep time with all these eras, epochs, eons, and all ages and these kinds of things. Yet it's very rare, if really any place in the whole world, that you can find this stack anywhere. You find they'll mix and match different things from different areas and kind of sandwich them together like a deck of cards in their I could call it imaginary, but they're esoteric. They're diagrams they have from Precambrian all the way down to
the geologic column.
Yeah, but there's no place really in the world that exists in its entirety. But what puts even more things into it, Doug, is when you find anomalies such as we're going to talk about here in Red Rock Valley Fire and Red Rock Canyon. Is that what they're called?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because there's some interesting things about that, and Doug has made note of it. And there's even a more interesting correlation why are those two things actually tied together, Doug?
Right. Yeah.
So why don't you talk about what is the anomalies we find here first?
Well, if you take a look at what they call the standard geologic column, on the bottom you have what's called Precambrian.
And that's the oldest rock.
The oldest rock.
That's supposedly 4.5 billion years to 3 billion years or something like that, I think is what it is.
And then up above that is Cambrian. And then you have Ordovician and several other layers. And then up further there's Jurassic, Triassic, and Permian.
Wow, okay.
And so what we have in Red Rock Canyon is the Cambrian is on top. Then you have Jurassic, Triassic, Permian.
What makes the Cambrian? It's Cambrian, not Precambrian, right?
Right.
So Cambrian is where we have the thing called the Cambrian explosion, where suddenly all the various life forms that we know about are pretty much almost came about at this particular period of time. It's like they call it the Cambrian explosion. But it is supposedly hundreds of millions of years before the Jurassic period, correct?
Yeah, the Cambrian is like 600 million years.
600 million years, right. Jurassic, of course, everyone knows that from Jurassic Park, right? Yeah, this is the middle, is it middle era? I always get it mixed up.
Mesozoic.
Yeah, but it's the Mesozoic era, eon or whatever. You got the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. So that's the age of the dinosaurs, supposedly. But you've got this thing that's separated by 600 million years, laying on top of a younger sediment. Okay, and how do they propose that happen, Doug?
Well, they say that that rock, that mountain, actually moved about 60 miles from the area where Death Valley is.
Yes.
And so that is where you have the highest mountain in that area is Mount Charleston, which is like 11,000 feet.
Ooh, okay.
So this is a big mountain.
Yeah.
And as you enter into Red Rock Canyon, there's a spot which is called Calico Basin. This is actually a good spot to actually see where the strata mix-up is.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a little park at the end of it that you can get out and hike up to it. And what's really nice about this is that the colors of the rocks are very distinctive. The Cambrian rock on top is gray, but the Jurassic, Triassic, and Permian are a very distinct red. And actually green underneath, and so you have that the sequence very obvious, and it's like like a knife edge, It's like it was superimposed on top of it. Now, that's something that the evolutionists also say is that there's the law of superposition, which means if you can tell that a rock is old or young by the sequence that it's in. So this is an axiom that they have for their arguments that they go in a sequence from younger down to the older.
Right. Okay.
And so this is a mix-up that they try to explain away with some sort of catastrophe. Well, guess who has catastrophe?
Catastrophe is in our wheelhouse. Yeah. But here the thing is, Doug. A lot of these, this is where you get the term overthrust, because the younger thing is now put underneath something that's older. It's somehow pushed over on top of them, moving. You say what, 60 miles, 70 miles,
60 miles, yeah.
Yeah. And yet, where is the evidence for this movement? Is there evidence for it that they would point to?
Well, there's a spot that you can take on this road that you take up into that area, and it sort of winds around up into the heights, so it maybe goes up 1,000 feet or so.
Right.
And there's a place called the Whitestone Trail, I think it was. And you go to this spot, and it's called the Trail to the Keystone Thrust.
Okay.
Well, the Keystone Thrust is what we're going to look at. Now, I go up onto the Cambrian, and there's I was actually finding coral fossils up there.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so you go up over this ridge and then go back down a little bit, and the rock color changes from the gray to the red.
Okay.
And so that's the contact between the two different kinds of rocks. And this is actually a spot that you would call a window. A window is where you have the entire surrounding rocks of the older rock around the younger strata below.
Oh, okay, all right.
So it's like the inverted clip. The clip is where you have the mountain is older, and underneath it is the younger strata.
So there's like a dip like this. Okay, so and yet two edges. Is this what you think? The Valley of Fire and the Red Rock thing, is that the edges of this dip, or am I misunderstanding?
Well, let's now connect the two parts.
All right, let's do that. Okay.
Well, because the Valley of Fire has the same sequence, out of order sequence, Cambrian, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, and yet the Valley of Fire is 75 miles to the northwest.
Okay.
And so there is actually a plaque, interpretive plaque in the museum at Valley of Fire, which shows the Muddy Mountain thrust. The Muddy Mountain, and they call it an overthrust because it's out of order. But it's the same out of order sequence that you find in Red Rock Canyon. And it's the same colors of rocks that you find in both parks. The parks themselves are amazing even without it, but without this whole anomaly. But I find it very interesting to see the machinations that they go through to try to explain this.
Yeah.
They say that this was the same part of the formation that took place in Red Rock Canyon. Well, obviously, because they have the same out of order sequence. But to imagine an event that would have taken the rocks from 60 miles away, another 75 miles to take it over to the Muddy Mountains.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Stretch credibility here, you know.
And so going back to the Keystone Thrust area, trail that I took, I actually had this on video, which didn't help my book very much because the video footage is a little bit grainy.
Oh, too bad. Oh.
But it showed this contact area, which had about a foot of broken up and crumbled rock, which is breccia.
Yeah, breccia. That's what you'd expect to see.
You'd expect to see if there was any rock movement, and obviously there was some kind of rock movement here because this whole area was all jumbled up, except for that the rocks on top and the rocks on the bottom were all strata that were horizontally laid down. And so you'd expect some sort of bioturbation and some kinds of...
okay, again, explain bioturbation for the audience out here. So
if it was there for a long time, you expect that the worms and things like that would break up the contact between the two layers.
Okay.
But this looks like it was all laid down in one event.
One fell swoop, huh?
Well, many events you have the tides going in and out.
But in close sequence to each other, probably in close time sequence to each other, as opposed to millions of years.
And so that more corresponds with the biblical flood model.
Right.
And so the biblical flood model, as we explained in previous sessions of this, is that there was a catastrophic movement of the plates and that they moved at a rapid rate over on top of each other. And the spot where Nevada is where two of these plates sort of come together.
Right.
So it's possible that during the flood sequence that there was some of this kind of movement going on, except if it was not laid down in this sequence, if it was laid down first and then pushed together, you'd expect more of the breaking up of the rocks.
A lot more. You expect a lot more breccia.
Breccia.
You'd see a lot more bioturbation. You'd see a lot more evidence of time laid between each of these layers, and you don't see that. That's what you're telling us, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so there's a little bit about Red Rock Canyon is that there's a spot called Calico Hills, and that's a marvelous place to explore.
Okay.
And it has the sandstone canyon in there, which is all carved out, and it's kind of fun to go down inside of it and explore and walk the trails down in there.
Yep.
So this is a canyon that was carved out. But the thing about canyons is that they are by themselves evidence for something that's quite young. Something that happens over millions of years. It takes, and like we talked about in a previous show, is that the rate of flow of the sediment in some of the river systems really isn't enough to explain the deposits that we see in the
right. We talked about the deltas specifically.
The deltas,
yeah. Okay.
And so that's a real problem, and if you want to believe in the evolutionary sequence that we have in our textbook.
Yeah. See, and the whole thing is why is geology such an important subject? We've talked about this in many shows, but I think it's always worthwhile to make mention. The geology is what they're used to give you the deep time.
Right.
Because no one has ever seen macroevolution ever happen. Mm-hmm. No one's ever seen one transitional thing could turn into something else. No one has ever seen it, so they need lots of time. And the idea is, no one's seen it because there's too much time. Geology ostensibly gives you that time that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't help you when you really go into the real issues with biology and all the other things. But it gives you at least a surface escape valve for the evolutionist, if you will, to say, all right, we've got millions of years of time. That's why you're not seeing this transitions, because it takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for one thing to turn into something else. That's a whole different issue. It has nothing to do with geology. But it is geology that, Doug, that was the underpinning of really everything that allowed Darwinian evolution to really manifest itself and get a foothold, because they started dealing or monkeying around with biblical time frames in the late 1700s. Even in the late 1600s, there were some things, but it was very, very minimal. But late 1700s with Hutton and then later on Lyell in the early 1800s, you got much more of this long period of time. But I tell you what, even them, they remind me of some of these like the Book of Mormon, which changes according to circumstance. The time frames went from a couple of million years to now 4.6 billion years.
Yeah,
I mean, they keep adding time, and although they're a little bit constrained with stellar evolution, which they don't like to talk about that being evolution, but they use the term all the time because of the age of the stars and the age of the universe. They can only go so far. They would have gone by. I think they would have gone about 100 billion years, 100 trillion years. They would have gone out, but they couldn't do it. So the geology, though, back to the Earth now, is the thing that it's the underpinning for all Darwinian evolution to me, and that's why this book is so critical.
For the evolutionists, the deep time doesn't help.
When you really
the more time you have, the more decay and mutations and
extinction and corruption. Yes, yeah.
And so it doesn't help explain how life got here by chance. All you have is little analogies of similar designs between different creatures that people piece together in a sequence, so that they say the one came from the other.
Doug, it's why they have today. They made such a big deal about birds being really dinosaurs, that they're evolutionary descendants, but the bird and the reptile are so fundamentally different. Yeah. It's not even close, you know.
I'd like to see that reptile that was starting to jump from the tree branches.
Oh, I got models here of dinos here, so because dinosaurs are my favorite thing. And I noticed none of them have bird wings, but they are making some of them now, Doug, with part wings on them now, and I go, this is going to look foolish, I think, in a few years when they realize how dumb that really is. Birds and reptiles are fundamentally different in every way you can think of. But back to your geology, Doug. We like to jump around a little bit because they do.
Well, you like to jump around.
I like to jump around. I have an ADD personality. He likes to stay focused. But so see, I'm getting back to geology. Yeah. But I had to do that because it touches. A lot of people ask us, Doug, why does deep time matter? Why does millions of years a big deal? And there are old Earth creationists. There are people that have accepted it, but the biblical time frame is very young. Okay. And the evidence from geology really supports a young Earth. It really supports a younger thing. And your Valley of Fire and Red Rock Canyon really is interesting. I like that. You talk about that window. It's like, I'm thinking in my brain like a volcano, only in a big thing. Yeah. Where you got like a big thing, and then you got like a crater that goes down into it or something. And that's the valley. That goes down in there.
Right. It doesn't go down very far, but it goes down, and you go up over this ridge, and
you can see the layers from one side to the other.
Yep. And so it's kind of another place like that is in the Smoky Mountains.
Yes, we were there. Now that I've been to. Yeah.
Cades Cove is a valley that's a window that shows out of ordered strata, and this is more commonplace than people think. Of course, the big one is the 50-mile overthrust in Glacier National Park.
Oh, Lewis Overthrust?
The Lewis Overthrust, yeah.
Yeah, that one is Precambrian rock over Cretaceous. Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
Yeah. And that's even that's strange. And again, it's like a knife edge between the two layers on that one.
Yeah. And it's like 350 miles long and 50 miles wide.
Yeah.
And so this sort of shows that there was a great upheaval, but the upheaval caused the layers to be laid down flat, and in Grand Canyon you have those layers showing in a particular sequence, but down at the bottom there's what's called the great unconformity, where all these layers were sort of tilted on the side, but it's sheared off completely.
Oh yeah.
At the bottom, and then you have successive layers going back and forth, and on top, which we interpret there was caused by tidal events and differential sorting of the different kinds of rock layers.
In the Genesis book of Genesis, there is an allusion to that. I think I first might have read that in the Genesis flood way back, Whitcomb and Moore's book. But it's been there's a biblical verse that says the waters went to and fro over the earth. Mm-hmm. That indicates like tidal. It's like back and forth.
Exactly.
To and fro, the waters went back and forth over the earth, which explains some of the weird stuff like dinosaur tracks. It could help explain some of that stuff and some of this other stuff that we have. But when the layers were laid down, they were basically sediment. It wasn't really rock moving 60 miles. It was sediment.
It was mud, mud and sand and
yeah.
All this stuff hardened, with there's sort of like a cementing agent that causes the rock.
Yes, when the water drains out, the sand, the mud, the sediment becomes lithified, becomes, if you will, rockified. That's where you get sandstone, and sandstone is what? Stone made out of sand. But all these things are like that, Doug. Now, Doug, one more thing. And again, we've talked about this before, but it's always good to reprise it. What makes an unconformity or a nonconformity or an overthrow? What is it that's the evidence that one layer is younger or older than another one? What do they generally?
Well, they use the fossils in the rocks to date the rock layers.
Okay, so Precambrian has no fossils in it. It might have a few what they might consider worms, or few might really, but generally no fossils.
Generally no fossils, except they found Precambrian pollen in.
Did they really?
In the Hecatite Shale in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, is that? I didn't know that. That's something to know. Cool.
Yeah, there's a whole Creation Research Society quarterly article about that many years ago in the 80s.
Oh, really?
And this is something that they try to debunk, but if you have pollen, it comes from trees, and the trees come from vegetation, and we got to figure out that this is a problem, so there's a lot of things that we try to figure out from looking through our biblical classes at it, that there was a time where God judged the earth, and there was a flood, a worldwide flood of Noah.
Yes. And
people don't like that.
No, because it means you're accountable. And it means that God will hold you accountable at some point in time. And there was, in the Old Testament, we have stories of physical judgment, because the Bible says first comes the natural, but then comes the spiritual. And I'm not so sure that when the spiritual judgment comes, it's going to be much worse than the natural. The natural one, beware the one who can kill the body only, but beware the one who can destroy your body and soul in hell. Mm-hmm. That's the one, that's the spiritual judgment, and you have to be aware of those. Those are more critical. And again, some people say, well, you're trying to scare the hell out of me. I said, I hope so. I hope so. But the reality is, the evidence from geology, biology, cosmology, I think holds up to the biblical worldview, holds up so strong in so many ways. We are not evidentialists in the sense that the evidence is going to prove the Bible. That's a hard issue. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, we want to remove obstacles to faith. If you believe in, to show you that it's credible, realistic, and reliable, that the biblical text is good and it's accurate, and it was written by somebody who was there when it happened. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. We also lay claim that the biblical text is written by God and the witnesses who were there at the time the events happened, where the Darwinian people, the geologists, the evolutionary geologists, they weren't there. Right, yeah. And we can say we weren't there either, and so some of the stuff we come up with is speculative. But we have the basic outline of what did happen, and within that parameters, we can come to a very good and reasonable conclusion as to what really happened and how it happened. There are things, but I'll tell you what, there are things we have that we have questions about. There are things we don't fully understand how it could happen. There's debates about how the flood happened. There's debates about continental drift. There's continental sprint. There's debates on a lot of stuff. That's not relevant to the point that about 4,500 years ago, the world was judged and it was destroyed by water. And in the end of time, it's going to be through fire.
I wanted to get back to some of the geological features that are found.
I thought we talked about them all. I guess we got about 5 minutes left, so let's go for it.
Well, the Red Rock Canyon, beyond the White Rock Trail that you go up to the Keystone Thrust, there's many trails that go all around through the park. You could probably spend several days hiking and backpacking in these areas. And there's some canyons back in there. There's like the Icebox Canyon, where the sun never really shines because it's so deep and narrow and black. Okay. And so the temperature in there, even when it's in the hundreds, gets way down below freezing.
Does it really? Wow. Yeah. Have you been in there, Doug?
Yeah, I've been in Icebox Canyon, and there's a spot where there's all these petroglyphs. And
you got a picture of that. I saw that.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of petroglyphs in there, and then in the Valley of Fire, the book cover is from the Valley of Fire. This is a leaning rock.
Okay.
And that's an amazing spot. And then there's a place called there's Atlatl Rock, which is a place where there's petroglyphs all over this spire that goes up like this, and the natives must have climbed up in this area and made all these pictographs, and they're actually petroglyphs because they're carved into the stone. The difference between a petroglyph and a pictograph is that the pictograph is painted, whereas the rocks, the petroglyph is carved in the rock.
Yeah, it's incised into it. Yep.
And there's another trail that you take called Trail to Mouse's Tank, and the mouse was the outlaw, Indian, and they chased him into this canyon area, and he survived by he found a spot where there was a pocket in the rock that held water.
Okay,
and so that's where he hid out, and so. Just before when you start on this trail, there's a place that I call the Eye of the Eagle Arch.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting because when I took a picture of it, it looks like it's huge.
It's that one. Okay.
And but if you look at it, I took it from about 2 or 3 feet away, and it was about 10 inches tall.
Yeah, I remember you showing that. Yeah, I got suckered into that one years ago, because that was years ago. You took that picture.
Yeah, I actually took another picture of it again on my last trip.
That's cool. Okay.
But this trail goes from the visitor center all the way up to the north part of the park. There's a turnaround up there, but there's all these domes and white rocks and red rocks, and it's just an amazing spot of sandstone. And I find that the sandstone layers are funny. There's a place called the Beehives, and the Beehive had the layers like this, but sliced through it is another layer that goes like that. And I'm just trying to figure out how that happened.
I know it.
So a lot of these things it's an amazing spot to explore.
It is.
And I hope you get a chance to go out and see it. Las Vegas is not my favorite place to visit.
Yeah, but Red Rock and Valley Fire are someplace to see.
We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.